I'm slightly vertically challenged. Can you see me behind here? Thank you very much, Caroline, and thank you very much to Parent Network Scotland for inviting me along to share some aspects of our perceptions and increasing parent confidence, capacity and impact today. I have to say I'm feeling a little bit left out today. One, I haven't been in a PNS course. More importantly, I have absolutely no link whatsoever to drum Jacqueline. And I feel even worse than I thought I did now, because I'm not going to sing or tap dance or anything else, so I'll apologise for that up front. But I have taken a wee note of that, Brian. I do think it's lovely. So, really, over the next sort of... Hello, Carol. Don't know where we're at time. As quickly as I can. So, over the next 10 minutes, I want to give you a quick overview of who Children in Scotland are, where we're coming from in matters of parental involvement, and where we see things are at for children and families today, and what we think we need to focus on moving forward. Put your hands up if you know who Children in Scotland are, and I'll see if I can skip that part. But it's a small selection of people. Oh, so just quickly then, Children in Scotland is the national umbrella agency for children's services organisations in Scotland. Quite unique in a number of ways, but particularly in that our membership represents statutory, voluntary, private sectors, and as well as individuals that are committed to children's services, irrespective of what part of the children's sector they actually serve. We provide support and representation and access to a whole range of national developments in relation to children's services. One of the important things is that we provide a place where organisational interests can be set aside in order to identify what's best for children, and that's something that our members think is really important. It gives them a place to say what they think is really important in terms of moving things forward for children and families. And we aim to increase, one of the key goals that we have is to increase the positive impact and influence of our members and stakeholders, contributing to the professional development in the sector, but importantly, for you to know today that we prioritise strengthening the engagement and impact of children and young people and their parents in shaping the services that they support, as well as enabling commitment to their development as successful individuals in their own right. One of the things that we think is critical to that approach is making sure that we've got a direct line of sight from the things that we're trying to influence through what the sector is telling us we need to influence, right back to what parents and children and young people themselves are actually saying, and that's really critical for us. It's not always easy, it's often a real challenge, but that's something that we feel is really important to underpin our work. So what's it like in Scotland? Well, we've heard lots of fantastic examples today of really tremendous work that's going on, and childhood is actually a success for the majority in Scotland. Most of our children are growing up happy, healthy, and family life is actually thriving. You'll see some of the stats there. We've got 1 million young people under 18 in Scotland, a fifth of our population. More than 3/4 of those are under 15, and under a third are under 5. You heard John talk about the changes in the Additional Support Needs Act today, and you'll see some of the stats that we've got up there that show us that actually things in the main are working well. We've got 98.2% of our children are not looked after. They're not under any child protection system. We've got 131,000 school pupils have additional support needs and are being supported in some shape or form, as you heard from John. And it's important to recognise that our additional support needs work is recognised as trailblazing at a European level. We're not getting it right, we haven't got it perfect, but there are lots of things that we are doing that's really good. At a British level, a UK level, 85% of children in Britain say they have a high level of overall life satisfaction. So we must be doing something right if we've got 85% of people saying that. And from an education perspective, in maths, Scotland's performance was similar to the OECD average. In reading and science, Scotland's performance was above average. And importantly, there was actually a reduction in the performance gap between disadvantaged and less disadvantaged pupils. We still want to improve in all of those things, but we're on the right path. So it's important for us to recognise the successful job our parents and families are doing, and today's been a fantastic example of that, a really fantastic example, and lots of things that hopefully we're going to be able to take away and share at a national level as well with people. And even sometimes when faced with some really tricky shapes of family life and circumstances, we're still managing to make it. So when we consider increasing parent capacity and confidence and involvement, we believe that it's really important to consider the shape of family life today, so that we make sure the tools and methods we use makes it easy for parents to engage by minimising any of the barriers that we might have. Family life does look incredibly different, and actually when I was preparing for today, in my head I always kind of thought, well, I'm just one of those people that just sort of trundles along and does what I do. But actually when I thought a bit more about it, I'm actually one of those statistics that you're seeing up there. I'm a stepmum of a teenager. I'm an older stepmum, much as I hate to admit it. Rely heavily on a flexible working pattern so that I can make sure that I'm there for my stepdaughter. I'm also a sibling and a stand-in parent, if you like, for a sister who has Down syndrome. And so balancing all of those things and making sure that I can be there and be the stepmom that I want to be for my stepdaughter is a real challenge. And so when we look at what life looks like today, I mean, there's some stats there, I don't want to go on in too much detail with them, but working life plays a huge part in how our parents can be involved in the services that we deliver today. And you can see some of the figures that are up there. And one of the things we need to remember is that those stats vary depending on the age of the children as well. Beyond the working life, beyond those sort of particular stats about how people are working, we need to think about the overall shape of families. And in 2006, it was predicted that by 2010, step families would be the dominant family form, and around a fifth of children are in a lone parent family. So what challenges does that face? Are we recognising that? Are we thinking about that when we're creating the services that we want to deliver? Are we thinking about that when we're thinking about how we engage with families? We heard from the WAMIOS mums and the myriad of things they're having to juggle. So what changes are we making? How are we taking that into account when we think we want to consult with parents? Putting a questionnaire out there, arranging a meeting of an afternoon, without thinking of all of those things really isn't genuinely consulting with parents. And we think it's really important that we highlight these figures to show the practical limitations for both men and women in taking a strong role in parental power within the services that we're looking at. How do you? Okay. So, in thinking about how we harness parental capacity, we need to bear in mind the economic constraints that are there. The working environment, low-paid work in some cases, zero-hour contracts, full-time working pressures, inflexible working patterns and requirements, alongside all of these other issues that we've talked about. There are many other factors that we know that influence the shape of family life in Scotland, and it's critical that all service providers, policymakers, legislators and influencers take into account all of those differences when we're thinking about consulting with parents. So what else can we do to actually harness some of that parent power? At Children in Scotland, we think there are broadly two big challenges for more structured and increased parental engagement required. Universal services of health and education, and addressing the matter of inequalities. In terms of universal services for health and education, these services impact on every single child's life, and yet they're still very much led by the providers of services. Engagement can be ad hoc at times. It varies considerably, service to service, area to area, and in some cases it's limited to engagement about a parent's individual child rather than the improvement of services generally for all children. And when we take this into account, we did some work with Edinburgh University's Centre for Research on Families and Relationships along with Children in Scotland, and we identified that using community assets, if we want to consider it in that way, is one of the critical ingredients to closing the attainment gap for children and young people. And key community assets are clearly parents. Parents have knowledge of their own child that will complement teacher skills and expertise. If parents feel more involved in their child's education, it will help their child achieve more and do better at school. Really straightforward, it's not technical. The parents as partners in their children's learning toolkit, as well as many of the other resources and tools that Parent Network Scotland offer, are really good examples of how to encourage parents to get more involved. Fathers, we've heard this morning, are less likely to have contact with school than mothers, particularly in early years and primary education. Michael told us about that this morning. And yet they represent a massive untapped resource in terms of influencing the shape of what we have to come. We need to make specific efforts to welcome and include dads. And there are lots of examples out there of how we can take that forward. Dad's days at school that are revolve around sports, barbecues, gardening, general dad stuff that we think dads might be interested in. But thinking a bit more creatively around that. And it's also really important to think about our non-resident dads and how we engage with them. Do we actually know in our services where our families are at? Inequalities continues to be an area of priority, and we heard, as I said, from the WANIOS mums. And at Children in Scotland, we would echo virtually everything that you said this morning. We do some work for Scotland's disabled children. We have a parent participation project, which is essentially doing much of what you're doing, looking at bringing together parents of disabled children to hear what they have to say and to look at how we can use that to influence the services that are being provided at a national level. And much of what you had to say this morning has been echoed throughout that. We need to make sure that our services truly understand our families. We need to make sure that they understand the challenges that they're facing. I could go on, there are a number of ways that at Children in Scotland we're addressing some of that, but I'm conscious I don't have very much time to go through that. We need to remember that our goal in doing all of this is to get it right for every child. And a child-centred focus like this means that we need to listen to our children and to the young people, and alongside listening to our parents. And that sometimes can bring its own dilemmas. Sometimes the two views don't always match. I don't know if you've noticed that. But sometimes one tries hard to influence the other. But it's vitally important that we recognise in creating safe and appropriate spaces for all parents to be involved and share their views. It's equally as important to hear, listen to and take account of the views of children and young people themselves, even when they might be at odds with the views of the parent. So, in conclusion, we're doing well. We can still do better. We've still got a way to go to make sure that the involvement of parents is embedded in the practice. There are pockets of examples of where involving parents is working well. There are some pieces of infrastructure that are built and in place, but we need to build on that and we need to embed it within the culture of our services. We need to understand the shape of our families, the practical lives that they're juggling, and importantly, that parents aren't simply just one big group of parents. In the same way as practitioners, we recognise that all of our children have individual needs, so do our parents. And we need to consider and make sure that we know what they are and don't make assumptions as practitioners that they're a parent, therefore this is what they need. Are we taking that into account when we're considering consultation? Are we reaching out to the wider group? What about our dads? What about the less confident parents? Working parents? Lone parents? The list is endless. Parents who are challenged to come along and cross the doorstep of whatever service it is that we're delivering. Parents who, for the needs of their children, find it difficult to do that. How are we addressing it? And lastly, don't forget that our children and young people do have that voice, even if it does say something different to their parents. As professionals and practitioners, it's our job, and we need to provide a safe and supported space for all of those to be involved. The views of parents, children and young people are critical to facilitating, engaging, informing and representing the partnership that's needed to achieve the national outcomes that we've set out for our children and young people in Scotland. Our services can only genuinely achieve this in partnership, and we need to prioritise getting this engagement with the support of work from organisations across the country like PNS, right across all of our services if we truly want to get it right for every child and achieve the big outcomes that will make Scotland the best place in the world for children to grow up. But as Michael said, and I'm going to pinch this one from you, I think, Michael, have you got a happy house? You know, it's a really simple way to look at it. Is your house a happy one? And that's your material home. The service that you're in, is the service that you're in a happy house? If it's not, what can we do different to change that? Thank you.